To see, I guess the goal tonight is to kind of get some of the answers for you guys, so that as people kind of challenge or say things, if you haven't been watching the news, it's already starting where all the support is going to the Palestinians. And so, to answer some of the arguments and give you kind of the history of Israel. Before 1948, who owned the land that we call Israel? Tough question. It's an important question. Oh, yeah. Many believe it's the Palestinians, right? It was the United Kingdom. That's who owned that land. And after World War II, after the Holocaust, what happened was that the remaining Jewish people who were alive wanted to go back to the land of Israel. It being owned by the United Kingdom at the time, the United Kingdom handed that over, and it became its own state. Now, if you look at any map in the Arab world, Israel's not there. They'll put it as Palestine. There was no Palestinian state. It didn't exist. It was under the control of the Romans, then there were some Arabs, and then the United Kingdom, and then Israel. So one of the things you have to keep in mind when we talk about the nation of Israel is the many people have this false notion that it was, prior to the Israelis coming in there, it was a Palestinian state. It was not. It was a United Kingdom territory, much like India was. Okay? So some of us may remember the many years, the decades of the Iran-Iraq War. Remember those? What's one of the things that put a stop to all of those wars in the Middle East? They all had a common enemy. So Israel's in a really tough position. All the Arab states want Israel because it keeps them from fighting amongst themselves. The rest of the world wants the fight to continue in the Middle East because as long as the Arab states are together, guess what? They all get their oil. Right? They don't have to sit there and choose sides where if they're getting oil from this country and this country's at war with that country, then they end up getting drawn into a war. So there's a lot of the politics of Israel that many people don't think through. So you think about Israel, it's about the size of New Jersey, not much bigger, okay? Gaza, obviously very, very small. Gaza is surrounded by Israel and borders a little bit by Egypt, okay? Egypt and Israel have both closed their border to Gaza. So the Palestinians that live in Gaza are kind of cut off. Now, you see all of the countries around, all the Middle Eastern countries, all the Arab countries, they argue that they're doing this for they're fighting for the Palestinians. You know one simple thing that any of those Arab countries could do? They could just let the Palestinians into their country. Right? I mean, you're talking a very small section of Israel. And they could just let all those people into the vast areas of any of these huge countries that are the Arab countries around it. But none of those countries will let them in. But why? Because they need them there. Because if the Palestinians aren't there, guess what? Then they don't have a unified Arab nation. They don't have a common enemy. So they want the fight. They just don't want to be. They don't want to be involved in the fight. They'd rather, like Iran, give them money into Gaza and to Hamas to fight. And they don't have to get involved in it. They just give the money. Okay. So you have to understand there's a lot of politics that goes on. One of the things you're already hearing, it's already been coming out. Black Lives Matter here in America is now totally supporting the Palestinian freedom because they're being. They're not saying this was an unprovoked attack. Some of the news agencies started saying that initially and pulled back from that. They're trying to say Israel provoked this attack by oppressing the Palestinians. Okay? Well, in 2005, the Israelis left Gaza. Just, they're gone. They have no involvement in it other than providing electric, food, and water. Now, the Palestinians are supposed to be paying the Israelis back for those services. That hasn't happened. So they've been getting free electric and water since 2005. So when they complain about the conditions that they're living in, that's their own government. I mean, when we sit there and say, well, it's unfair that there's people starving in India, we should blame the United Kingdom? We'd say no, because if they're starving in India, it's the Indian government, right? It doesn't matter that once they were a territory of the United Kingdom, that doesn't matter anymore. Well, Gaza, since 2005, has had its own government. They run it. The fact that there's all this money and aid that comes into that government and the government keeps it and doesn't give it to the people, that's not the Israelis' fault. Because the Israelis don't control that area. So this is some of the politics that goes on there that will help you when you talk to people. Because as you talk to people, these are some of the arguments you hear on the news, you hear people making. And they don't know what's really going on. And maybe some of this is new for some of you guys. Okay? But that's the battle. This is a conflict that is in many countries' benefit to keep it going. Now, what actually brought this about? There's two main things that I think brought about what happened last weekend. One, I know that CNN is blaming Donald Trump. It's really kind of crazy how because you knew it had to, right? It had to be Trump's fault. Well, supposedly it's Trump's fault because the Iranians supported Hamas, and they got support from Russia, and Trump is in bed with Russia. So it sees Russian collusion here. The reality is what they're doing is trying to avoid the real issue. Don't know how many of you know that we recently did about a month ago a trade deal with Iran where we did a prisoner exchange and we freed up $6 billion that we had frozen of Iranian money. Now, if you watch CNN today, they're very clear in saying, they're reporting that it's very clear that none of that money has been touched. But if you guys think about your own case, say you're getting your tax refund. Say you're going to get $5,000 back in your taxes. And you know that's coming in next week, but you need to go buy, your car broke down, you got to buy a car. And you have $5,000 in your bank account that you're supposed to use toward your mortgage, which is due in 2 weeks. Could you take your mortgage money and use that to pay the car knowing that your tax refund is coming in? Yeah. So the fact that all of a sudden $6 billion was given to Iran frees up money that they're going to, so they can say, okay, we could use that money for, food and humanitarian aid and things like that. But all they do is free up the money they did have planned for that, and they sent money to Hamas. They have admitted to it. Hamas has admitted to it. It just seems people in America can't seem to admit it. I mean, I don't understand why. Both sides in there are saying, yes, Hamas is working with Iran. Why should we think that they're not? They're saying they are. So one thing is all of a sudden they got $6 billion. But this was kind of brought about because of Trump. Because of this. What also wasn't well reported back when Trump was president is that he worked 4 peace deals in the Middle East. His administration did what no one else ever thought of doing. Okay? What most people tried to do when they tried to work a peace treaty in the Middle East is they would take Israel and their biggest enemies and try to bring them together to agree. The Trump administration didn't do that. What they did was they said, why don't we get a peace deal between Israel and those that are friendly with Israel, like Jordan or Egypt? And he did that and got 4 peace deals. One of the deals that was not done during his administration but had been started and was in the works was a peace deal with Saudi Arabia. And the idea that the Trump administration had was that if they could start doing peace deals and they start mounting up, it puts more pressure on the other Arab countries to do a peace deal. And the next one in line was Saudi Arabia. And that is what really those are the two things that kind of instigated what happened this week. It's to put a stop to the peace deal, because when they went in, one of the things Hamas was calling for was for all of the Arab states to come and join in this battle, in this war. That's what they were hoping for. Now, it hasn't happened yet. I hope it doesn't happen. Hezbollah on the West Bank has kind of done a little bit, just so you understand. So if you look at a map of Israel, okay, the Gaza is at the very lower west part of Israel, and the West Bank is kind of where it's on the central eastern part, where Jordan's at. And so they always have had these two groups that just fire missiles in. Okay, and so right now those are the only two groups that there's been activity that we know of. And so what they're hoping for is to get all of the Arab countries to start joining in. And their goal, they've said it, they're being really clear, they want to wipe Israel off the map. Now it's important to understand that, because when Bibi Netanyahu, he'll say that that's basically what his goal is right now. He says you can't negotiate with these people, and I'll explain why in a bit, but he's saying that they're just going to wipe Gaza out. And you look at that and people say that's so wrong. But isn't that what all the Arab countries are saying they want? Like, why can they say we can wipe Israel off the map, but somehow Israel can't say you've attacked us and we're going to wipe you off the map? I mean, as soon as the attacks happened, the very first response from the White House was to put out a tweet that called for restraint. Yeah, a ceasefire. It was removed after an hour. I mean, I will admit, I think that President Biden is in a very difficult position for several reasons. One, he's the one that freed up $6 billion that allowed this to happen. Two, he needs the Jewish American vote. This is the one thing that I think that he doesn't understand, is that the Jewish vote is heavily tied to Israel, even though they're not religious. Okay, my father's not religious, but he is fit to be tied over this. There's a guy who I work with, I see him every day. He hasn't slept since Saturday. And he's a liberal. He wants nothing to do with Biden because he knows Biden funded it. And he's like, it doesn't matter all the strong language he says, he caused it, right? So I mean, Biden's in a tough bind right now, because the liberal part of the progressive part of this country wants to support Hamas and what they're doing, but all the Democrats need the votes from the people, the Jewish people, right? And the Jewish vote in America is one of the largest votes. We don't hear about that. We always hear about the Black and Hispanic or the women, but the Jewish vote is one of the ones that the Democrats rely on very much, and that may be gone, which would be bad for us. Might be good for the country, but so that's kind of. I want to give a quick overview, and I want to allow time for questions too. So with all that, any questions with that before we get into why we can't negotiate with these people? So as far as some of the stuff that I'm giving, you can see, you can look at who the land of Israel. You can go look that up and see that was under the UK. There's a UK territory.
No, you agreed that
Yeah.
because of after World War II.
Because of World War II.
Because they got nowhere with the Holocaust and all
Which
that.
is why, someone once asked me, they were like, what good comes out of the Holocaust? I said, the nation of Israel. Like, we wouldn't have a nation of Israel today, which I believe is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the Holocaust. So it's one of the things you learn with God. There's a doctrine known as the doctrine of concurrence. God can use the evil doings of men to bring himself glory. So we tend to look at the evil that men are doing and not look at what God might be doing through things. Okay. So one of the things in Israel today, the Palestinians can work in Israel, they can live in Israel, they cannot vote in Israel. That's one thing that's not allowed. And that's one part of what they'll argue is the oppression. So, they feel that, from a Palestinian perspective, people feel that, we used to live in this area, there was a war, we got displaced. their argument is we need to move back home. The people who are alive today didn't live, they didn't live in that land. I mean, most of them. Yeah, the parents or grandparents maybe. But, if you were in your 20s in 1948, you're kind of old now. Part of the reason is we all get our oil from the Middle East, right? And so and we kind of saw this a little bit some years ago when there was an issue with Syria when Barack Obama was president. Right? All of a sudden, people had to divide the lines because those who got their oil from Syria had to back Syria. Okay? So if say you have one country's getting their oil from Iran and one country's getting their oil from Iraq, and those two are at war, well, where you get your oil, you have to support them because that's where you get your oil from. So you may not do what's right as much as what you think is right for your country. And so, unfortunately, and a lot of this goes back to your question. When I was in Israel the first time, we had an Israeli guide who gave us a great education on the politics there. And I think it was good because he was fair on both sides. There is, some people will try to make it like the Israelites, like you're saying, they were good to the people. Some were, some weren't. There's a lot of prejudice in that area. You have generation after generation after generation that are raised to hate people just because of either their religion or where they're from. Okay, a friend of mine, he actually went to school with the now king of Jordan, so he's actually goes to Jordan and stays in the palace. Okay, and it's interesting because the king of Jordan is trying to do something that his life has been on the line for the last 30 years. He's trying to bring a unity between the Christian, the Muslim, and the Jewish person. And what he's doing is he's got private schools throughout Jordan where all three of those religious communities come together for school so they get to meet one another, be friends with one another. And he's hoping that after 40, 60 years of this, that in Jordan they can overcome this prejudice. So it's a risky thing because he's got a lot of people that want him killed because of it. But he is the king. He's got guards. He's got the army. But it's a tightrope he's walking.
Because a lot of the Muslim schools, they teach the kids from a young age.
And same with the Jewish schools, and same, that's the thing we have to understand. It's, look, there is for many people in Israel, there's a prejudice against the Palestinians because of the hatred the Palestinians have or the Muslims have toward the Jewish people. And so when you grow up with racism as being commonplace, you become racist, and they have it on both sides. It is kind of interesting. Before Saturday, I don't know how much you guys study Israeli politics, but Israel was, this next election, Netanyahu went really hard. There's been a lot of protests. The reservists said we're not. They were pulling up reservists and they wouldn't show up to duty, and they weren't suffering any consequences. They refused to serve in the army, which is mandatory. There was such division, and that's gone. This is United Israel. I mean, when I was watching CNN with my dad, the CNN reporter was trying to get all of the Palestinian leaders, all the anti-Netanyahu leaders, like the people from the opposition party, to try to be like, well, shouldn't you go after Netanyahu? Like, they were trying to cause division. And one after another was like, this is not time for that. This is our state's, our state is, our existence is on the line. So any other questions with kind of the politics?
My only question is, why are we watching CNN?
Because that's what my father says. But it was interesting because Saturday, even CNN was they were calling it a terrorist attack. They've already, by Monday, that's changed. Now it's Israel that provoked this. And they're saying they provoked it by keeping the Palestinians, in Gaza. Well, that was part of the agreement. They walked out of Gaza, had no control over Gaza, but the agreement is that the Palestinians stay in Gaza. So they agreed to that. both sides. Right? That was the treaty. And so, you know, it becomes a thing of, you know, how much are they, how much of this are people that they brought it upon themselves, right? I mean, you look at our inflation. We can't go blame China, right? No, it's our government doing it.
Something is kind of clear to me about the situation with Gaza being such a small area and having how many people in it?
I actually don't know the population.
In like sardines.
Yeah.
And they don't have, so I was kind of thinking, you know, it's, they can't leave.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you've got all these women and children and they can't farm because there's not enough land. And now hearing you speak makes me realize, you know, they don't have a lot of their own natural resources to farm and whatever, so they're reliant on their government to provide them with electricity, water, food.
Well, I think actually it comes from Israel. Yeah.
Well, you said that their government.
Well, they run their own government, but that's provided.
Is,
It's provided by Israel, and they're supposed to be paying the Israeli government back, but they don't.
well, that's crazy because their government has the money,
Yeah.
but
And their government has money from other countries.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: they border Egypt, but Egypt won't let them in. Nobody is
they
accusing
used to
Egypt.
have refugees, but
Yeah.
I guess that was after the 6-Day War.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, since 2005, you know, that's been shut down.
Oh,
So you think about it and go, well, like everyone's complaining Israel's oppressing them because they won't let all the Palestinians into Israel. Why doesn't Egypt let them in? They have the same religion, right? Why is Iran saying we got to help fund Hamas and help the people? Why don't you let them come to your country?
the one that's nasty stuff in there.
Huh?
Egypt doesn't want Hamas and all that in there.
Well, part of it is that, but part of it is if they want there to be fighting within Israel, they need a common enemy. All right? It keeps them united. But I mean, what country wants to go to war? None of them. So having like Hamas or Hezbollah, you know, doing these little skirmishes, it kind of keeps it up where, I mean, and you can actually see, you know, in the past you could see where, you know, when they would have an election, they would just, right before an election, they shoot missiles into Israel shoots a couple of missiles back, it became like a regular thing. You know, and that helps them with their elections, you know. But the thing is that you have to realize that a lot of the countries that are funding this don't actually want to solve this. Right? Because if it's solved, guess what? If there was no Israel, then we go back to the Iran-Iraq war, which is over religion. You know, that's really what you know. You have two different groups of Muslims between Iran and Iraq. Okay, the Sunni and the Shia. So there's two different groups, and that's what that war was. You know, all those decades was about. And so there's a lot of turmoil in that whole area.
So Hezbollah is Shiite and Hamas is Sunni?
I don't know what Hezbollah would be.
And
Is
they're
it
not,
Hezbollah in Lebanon?
Yes. Well, it's yeah. I mean, it's kind of to be considered, but it's on the border of that and Jordan.
and the Shiites and the Sunnis were not the best of friends.
No,
But
even though
now,
they're both
but the enemy of
Muslim.
my enemy is
Well,
my
and
friend.
that's the thing. They stop fighting each other, and they support the fighting of these two groups within Israel. And so, you know, so I said, why can't you negotiate with these people? Understand that whenever you watch, when you watch the battles that go on, if you see, and there'll be some bombings, and if you do watch like a CNN, you'll see them showing, you know, an apartment building going down. Maybe, you know, they were showing that on Saturday, you know, an apartment building that was bombed and taken down. You have to understand something about, you know, Hamas. They put all their artillery, their arms, and their military are in hospitals, are in schools, are in residential areas. And so when Israel or anyone was to bomb them, yes, you have people that are being, so, one of the things that Israel does, and I can't give the source on this, but basically Israel goes this far. They send text messages to the people in the buildings, in the residential buildings, saying to get out. We're going to bomb the building because they don't want the innocent life being killed. They were actually having a robocall to call people, and what you ended up having from the Palestinian leaders was to put a message out saying, no, this is the Israelis are trying to tell you that you can't, that you're cowardly if you leave, and they're just trying to cause division. Like, okay, so when they do bomb, guess what's going to happen? You're going to see a bunch of innocent life being killed. Whose fault was that? The fault of the people saying, hey, stay here when you know that they're bombing. The difference between, one of the major differences, and this is generation after generation of people that are raised to be terrorists. It's not all of the people, okay? But those that are running the country are that way. And they use innocent people, okay? Their chant, if you listen to their chants are for death. They value death. They don't value human life. They have a view of the next life that they think they're going to be rewarded. I can get into, when you understand Islam, there's a reason that's the case, but, and just put it this way, in Islam, there's no way to know you're going to heaven other than dying in a jihad, holy war. It's the only guarantee you're going to heaven. So when people have guilt over their sin, we had this in the Middle Ages with the Roman Catholic Church. Basically, when they were doing the Crusades in Israel, they released all the prisoners. And the Catholic Church said, if you die in this holy war, you're guaranteed heaven. So you had a bunch of criminals going, well, I want to go to heaven, this is my only way. The Muslims aren't doing anything different than the Catholic Church did. It's the same thinking, it's a way of controlling people. And when you have you have so many people that have that mentality, that they're willing to do what happened Saturday. So what happened Saturday is that it was unprecedented. Now, some of the concern that the Israeli government and our government has is we left a lot of military resources in Afghanistan. And the fear is that much of that got into Gaza, because the number of missiles that they launched that day was far more than Israel knew that Gaza had. So somehow they know, okay, but there's a lot more missiles.
So many that it overwhelmed the Iron Dome.
The Iron Dome, if you know what that is, it's basically a system that when a missile comes in, they shoot a missile to explode it while it's in the air. Well, they shot so many missiles that the Iron Dome couldn't take them all out. But they did something, they came in by power set, right? They floated in on parachutes. Just dozens and dozens and dozens of them. I saw the videos of people, they're at a festival, they're at a music festival. And you're sitting there videoing, and they thought, I'm sure they thought this was part of the festival, all these people coming in by parachute. And they're running over to video, with their videotapes. And as these guys are landing and start shooting, people are dropping the phones and running. Right? No one expected that. But the thing is, they came in with the purpose of it. They targeted a festival, not a military. This is why I would say they're terrorists. They targeted innocent people that they kidnapped to use as hostages. They brought back into Gaza, and they openly said that if you listen to what they're saying, they said if there's any retaliation from Israel, they're going to kill people on national TV. That's why they kidnapped. I got to see an interview with one of the men who was captured by the Israelis, and they interrogated him and asked him, why, what was your goal of these kidnappings? What was your goal of doing it? And he, what was your purpose of kidnapping these women? And he said to dirty them, to rape them. Okay? There's the brutality that they had, and the way they treated people. 40 dead infants that were beheaded. I mean, they want to soil the body because their view of the next life. You can't negotiate with that. Because they're not looking to get, and this is the thing, we think in a Western mindset where if we can just negotiate and reason with people, we can work something out. These are people who have been raised to believe we have to wipe a whole group of people out. And you can't negotiate with that overnight. You know, like what Jordan is doing, what the king is doing in Jordan, that he knows that takes 80 years to change that mindset. He knows it's going to take a long time. And so it's just not something you're going to change overnight. And so this has been the case with this battle for decades. And I think that they've kind of crossed the line with the you know, by kidnapping people and pulling them back into Gaza. I'll recommend if you want, you can listen to Ben Shapiro. He's an Orthodox Jewish man. He was a lawyer who is a commentator. He is one of the owners of Daily Wire. He's a conservative commentator. But the past 3 days, he's gone through the history of Israel and Gaza. And
I've heard his stuff. He's a pretty smart guy.
he's a wicked smart guy. Though he didn't take my challenge to a debate. But I have responded to some of the stuff he said about Jesus being the Messiah. It was sent to him. I didn't know that, but I'm not big enough that he's going to debate me. But anything more?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts, and that is, so what can we do now? And a couple things that we can do is, of course, is to.
Well, let me just end with one thing.
All right, have a-
So here's my one thing to end with. We could look at this and say, man, we could get along with the way Netanyahu's talking, many Israelites, many Jewish people are talking, we need to wipe out Gaza. Politically, that may be the right thing. Here's the thing, my thinking is, we could look at this, I mean, this is evil. What's going on is evil. We could look at this and say, that's evil, we need to wipe it out. God has been seeing this kind of evil go on for 6,000 years. My prayer, as I keep seeing this news and seeing what's going on, is that I would learn to be more long-suffering like God is. Because this is not new to him, and he lets it continue. And I have to learn how to have more grace toward other people and how to be more long-suffering with other people, even if they're that evil. So,
Good point. Very good point. So a couple of things we need to do, and I think to begin with, we need to encourage our elected officials to condemn the right people, and then also to support Israel.